Hello, folks. This is, I don't even know what update this is. I should check that. Give me a second. 6? No, it's 7. Look at that. See the benefit of keeping a notebook next to you. This is supposed to come out last week, but thanks for the understanding, all that, and thank you all for your kind words. It was much appreciated. So I'm going to keep this fairly short, as I think it's probably close to an hour long, maybe a little over, interview with Jade and Tailger, talking about their characters, lore, all that fun stuff. This is my first official, I guess, character spotlight, as it's more centered on the characters themselves than anything else. So this is a different aspect. Usually these updates consisted of, a little bit about events and stuff, and then talking about the guild, a character, and future plot lines for that guild. So this is a little different. I want to continue these because this is actually more of something I enjoy, is talking to people for an hour or two on end about their character. So I hope you enjoy it as well. It should. It was a very nice, enjoyable interview. Jade and Tailger, very, very fun to interview and talk to. I could probably have talked to them for a couple more hours and not worried about it. But we'll save that for future episodes where we'll go crazy and interview everybody for 5 hours on end. Speaking of updates, I haven't been back super long time. I only came back like 2-3 days ago, depending on when you listen to this. So I've checked out a bit of the forums. I see there's something about an Iron Nord event coming up. It is in April, so still got some time to work on that. And then something else as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me see. No, can't find it. I heard the Thaw Festival went very well, so I'm glad that was a good hit. So yeah, like I said, have a quick, well, not a quick interview, a very long interview, but a very enjoyable interview with Jade and Tailger about their characters. I hope you enjoy. It was very fun to do. So I will see you all around later, and thanks for the questions in the thread. Those were very nice. Turned out very well. So I hope you hear your question and, enjoy the answer. Take care. Bye. Hello and welcome to the interview for this week's episode. Today I am joined by Jade and Tailger. So this is a dual interview. If you both want to say hello.
Good day, sir.
Hello.
And good day to you, to steal a line from Mark Madden. You probably have no idea who that is, though.
I do not. You're right.
I second not knowing.
He's a radio host in Pittsburgh for sports, so Lycos will know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. So let's just go into it. I did give away Jade's character name, but Tailger, I always call you Tailger, so if you want to introduce your character for everybody.
Well, I have a lot of characters, but the one you probably know me the most as is Zatani. She's a Khajiit, a Suthi Khajiit. She's been around on Nirn for about almost 34 years now, and she's been around Skyrim for probably almost 9 years now. Of course, game-wise, it's only been about 2 years, but the game's only been out for 2 years, so you got to go with what you got. She was born in the year 550 in southern Elsewhere, and she lived there till about she lived there till she was 24, if I remember right. I'd have to actually read her backstory that I wrote a long time ago, and she had to leave Elsewhere because she was a little vocal about the treatment of the Khajiiti people during the beginnings of the Altmeri Dominion. It was not really the Altmeri Dominion yet, but there was premonitions of it starting to happen in lore, and with the Three Banners War kind of heating up, the Khajiit people were kind of put on the front lines and treated very poorly in her mind. And she became rather vocal about it and was basically booted out of Elsewhere and traveled across Black Marsh by a leaky rowboat that was patched up with cheese, thanks to some Argonian slaves. I mean, if you
hold on, what? You patched a boat up with cheese?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're basically running for your life, and you have this leaky rowboat. What are you going to patch it with in order to make it see across the Topal Sea without it sinking? What do you got on you? Well, there's a little bit of cheese, and I got the sun. It'll hold. It'll hold. You know,
the ingenuity of Khajiits.
As long as the slaughterfish don't catch it, you know?
That's amazing. I'm glad I found that out. Oh, man.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's not something she'd really talk about in character unless questioned, but, these little tidbits in the backstory I always like to give away.
Oh, I'd be bringing that up every time.
Sheogorath was right all along. The power of cheese.
She basically traveled north along Black Marsh, the coastline there, once she made it across in her cheese-endowed boat, and which basically fell apart on the opposite shore due to obvious reasons. And spent about a year traveling north, and eventually found Skyrim. And she was kind of, mistreated at first. Not really mistreated, because the Nords don't really care about anything. They just, want to drink and have brawls and have fun, which is what she enjoyed about it. And she started to discover that, these people aren't too bad, and she started to become more prevalent in the community. And before you know it, she found Miss Maddie, who I think you remember, Nick.
I did a full-on farewell video for Miss Maddie.
I know. Those are good times. But we had a whole backstory where Zatanni basically became her kind of surrogate aunt when Miss Maddie was coming of age, and helped her form the Daughters of Kine. And that was her first guild, her first roleplay guild, and basically her first family. And the player behind Miss Maddie unfortunately doesn't have time or can't really play the game much anymore. So she basically assumes that she's dead now, gone off to Sovngarde. And most of the Daughters of Kine characters have either died or the players behind them have left the game. So she spent a lot of time kind of alone after that happened. And she had a whole issue with her werewolf spirit basically becoming possessed. And I think you were around for that, Nick, when she was up in the meadow and stuck in a werewolf for like a week.
Yeah, I found a werewolf chilling right next to my character's house.
Yeah, she had no idea it was your house at the time, so she hoped she didn't.
It was
she
just weird. I'm like, you had told me earlier that there was like a hunt going on for the werewolf, and then all of a sudden I just take my character home, and there you are, just chilling out.
Yeah, it was the last sliver of sanity in the character, which is she lost control of her transformation and was permanently stuck as werewolf. And the only remaining bit of rationality that her mind could cope with was that she needed to get somewhere safe. And that meadow is really her safe spot. That's her last refuge. And it's kind of where she goes when she needs to meditate and just kind of, sit with the trees and the bees and the birds and enjoy nature for a while. And so that was like the last grasp of her mind to go there. And then basically she stuck as a werewolf. And it happened to be where your house was too. I hope you don't mind.
No, as long as we don't make it permanently available for everybody else to know.
Yeah,
we'll be all right. I gotta raise a family of 4 kids, and they're all Bosmer. It gets a little crazy.
Yeah. So she's as far as gameplay, or as far as her character, she's what I like to call an underdog or undercat, you might say.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. When I first...
The cat references.
They begin.
When I first started ESO, I actually had no idea I was a role player, even though I actually was. I just didn't know it. And I always loved the idea of playing the character that tries to do good in spite the world seemingly stacking everything against them. And Zatanni's kind of my representation of that, which is that they had a kind of a crazy childhood that involves their parents being killed off with flu and being chased out of their home. and basically being a race that no one trusts immediately, and stuck in a foreign land and all this bad stuff. Yet, in spite of all that, she wants to leave Nirn in a better place when she leaves. And that's really her ultimate goal in life. Anyway, I think that's about all I got on her. I mean, she's got a deep history. So I could go on and on for ages, but she's a fun character. Talk to her if you say hi or want to say hi to her.
All right, and welcome back to part 20 of this interview. Jade, if you'd like to describe your character.
So Jade is a Cathay Rot Khajiit. She's quite a bit younger. Well, not quite a bit. She's 12 years younger than Zatanni. So she was born in, I guess that makes 562. She had a pretty rough start, being one of a very large litter of kits, to a mother who was not Cathay Rot, so she ended up having a hard time feeding Jade and the family. Effectively, the way the backstory goes is, with limited resources, being that she was born in the northern end, up near the deserts of Dune, she learned to kind of fend for herself pretty early in life. All of the lore really leans towards Khajiit being pretty quick to grow up, but so she was forced to grow up a little faster than most. She bounced around quite a bit, ended up leaving home. She did the nomadic life for a good portion of her childhood, which lended a lot to the idea of her being a survivalist, stomping around in the deserts and kind of following either merchant caravans or soldiers, or as people were cutting across the northern end of elsewhere to get to imperial lands, so she was kind of just following the winds wherever they blew her.
It's the best way to live life.
It was rough for her because of how young she was, but the way I kind of wrote her story, being that I made her to play when I originally made the character, much like Zatanni, I didn't realize that I was going to be role playing in ESO, so I created the character to play as Pact without really any particular reason, just that I wanted to be up in Morrowind, I guess. So when the backstory needed to form, because I ended up joining a role-playing guild in House Namos right off the bat, I sort of backtracked and ended up coming up with a story that made sense for her to be there, and it involved a pretty troubled childhood, getting on the wrong side of the law early, and effectively being outcast from elsewhere, much like Zatanni. By going through Black Marsh, she didn't have a leaky cheese boat, so it ended up taking her quite a while longer to get through.
Hey, I had the Topal Sea to cross. So.
Yeah, Jade did hers on foot, so
you just had the Nibini River, so
right. Yep.
Did you have cheese shoes at least?
No cheese shoes. Probably not a lot in the way of shoes at all, actually.
That's true. Shoes have to be because you always, I don't want to say I always see it, but I do see Khajiit players with like boots and stuff on. How uncomfortable does that have to be? Not to really sidetrack you, but I need to know.
So I mean, like Jade loves wearing boots, and a part of it is because she had such an issue where she's literally crossing the continent barefoot. So and they're kind of two different Khajiit. They're either digitigrade, or there are just the regular flat-foot type plantigrade feet. And while Zatanni is digitigrade, Jade has regular human-style feet, and most boots are made for that style feet. So she plunks her feet in boots all the time. She just has to have extra room for claws at the end, and There's multiple times in roleplay where Jade will kick off her boots because she needs to grip onto something or whatever.
Or just let the claws make room.
right through the end of the boot.
Yeah, just cut a hole straight through the boot.
So yeah, she spent a while trucking around in Black Marsh. She managed to skirt completely around all of like the inner vaults and all of that, just because there's no way she would have survived any of it. But she avoided the most dangerous parts on her way north along the edge, and she was actually, she was only in her teens at the point where she did this, so she kind of learned what bugs she could eat and what water smelled good enough to drink, and did everything the hard way. There's plenty stories of her getting nabbed by a snake or tangling with whatever horrible lizard thing that was stomping around in the swamp. But eventually, she figured out that not all of the stories that her Khajiit parents and that she had heard from various other merchants and stuff about the Argonians were true, and she managed to befriend a couple on her way through, and they helped her along as she kind of got spat out in Morrowind kind of naturally. So when she got to Morrowind, she was immediately thrilled to not have constantly being caked with mud and wet and basically eating nothing but bugs. But
Was see no flesh flies trying to tear her face away.
Right, yeah, it's like in the Lord of the Rings where the hobbits are getting eaten by midges. I picture that's pretty close to it.
We've offended all Argonians now.
But so she ends up in southern Morrowind, and like I said, it took her a while to get through Black Marsh, but effectively, early 20s, she starts finding out, oh, well, there's dark elves up here, and that's fine. Oh, look, they have lots of slavery. That's kind of different. And oh, look, there's more Khajiit. And then realizing that the Khajiit here are not exactly here of their own power, and that most of them were afraid to talk to her because they assumed that she was an escapee, and she ended up kind of going back to not knowing the land and not having any idea what the society was really like, until she managed to stumble through Ebonheart and happened on a cry for a decent day's pay for some work, and she's been with House Namos ever since.
And then House Namos, it just sort of recently came up to Skyrim, right?
Right, yeah. Collectively, the house decided to escape the turmoil and judgment of the Morrowind, of the other Morrowind houses, and actually, Zatanni had a pivotal point in Jade. As she was there, she ascended the rank in House Namos relatively quickly, just because she's adaptable and can basically get things done. But she was sort of spearheading the idea of finding a place for House Namos to exist in. We wanted to be somewhere around Riften. And I mean, at that point, Jade had already met Zatanni the first time, but yeah, Zatanni was pivotal in Jade being able to get away from Morrowind.
This is a perfect chance to segue. Thank you. This never happens. I never have a segue. So how did you two meet in character?
So, the first time they met, I was really distracted out of character, and Tani had to remind me that the meeting I thought was the first one wasn't actually the first one. But I sort of remember it. I know that it was in Morrowind, and Zatanni had come down to visit, but she remembers it better than Jade does.
I have a similar issue with Jordan about how Aliella and Niandel met, so I completely understand. Somebody has to know.
Yeah, it was the whatever the Tamriel equivalent of Halloween festival happening in I think Telvanni Contracts was putting it on there, doing the costume contest, and Zatanni came down just to see what was going on, and ran into someone who asked if she was security because she wasn't in costume, and no, she just came along to see what was going on, and eventually that person introduced Zatanni to Jade, and they went back to the plantation that Namos had their guild set up, and had drinks, and Zatanni watched Jade wander around and like try to wrestle drinks from the poor waitstaff that didn't want to serve Khajiits. And Zatanni was just like awestruck because this character was just like living in this land where they're mistreated and totally looked down upon by everyone else, and was just trying to get a drink for Zatanni and this other player, and was like wrestling through it, and eventually triumphed, which was awesome. And I love the way Jade described everything in such detail, down to the armor, and put so much love and care into every post that the character made. So we became OOC friends kind of that way, just because I thought Jade was a good role player. And eventually Jade, the character Jade, came up to Skyrim because Namos is an agricultural guild, and their primary output was Sajama at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jade.
Absolutely, yeah. They're all about supplying spirits to various taverns all over the Packlands, yeah.
And you know me, I like to incorporate guilds that are doing things together, so that way you build much greater stories when you have two or more guilds that are working on a collaborative project. And I knew the Order of the Raven ran the Withered Tree, which they're famous for their Wednesday, their Midas Tavern Nights. And so I talked to Jade in character and said, hey, these guys would probably be interested. Obviously I said it more eloquently than that, but you get the idea. And so I think
I like that you went on that Jade describes everything in incredible detail, and you're just like,
yeah, whatever.
You're like, hook them up.
Yeah. And so we set up some role play that way, and we got people interested. And Jade came up and actually I think Jade came up and watched Zatanni in one of her famous sparring matches at the Withered Tree, and cheered her on.
Watched her tossed around by somebody.
She's famous for that, so it happens all the time.
I remember specifically that she lost because Jade was instantly in Zatanni's corner. So, and I remember being disappointed that Zatanni lost. But it is a role-based system that the Withered Tree uses for their sparring. So it's not always indicative of the actual role-playing skill or the skill of the character. But
how dare you say that the dice are at fault?
I managed to lose the most recent Withered Tree tournament in 4 rolls. I don't. It's definitely the dice's fault.
That's rough.
It was horrible. I was waiting for weeks, and then
you were there for like a grand total of 5 minutes and then gone.
Fact. Vidgrod handed Jade her furry butt.
See, it was just stacked in a Nord's favor.
That's what it was.
Play the race card.
Then at some point later, Namos was talking about moving to Riften, and we worked this out kind of out of character a bit beforehand. But the Daughters of Kine had basically fallen apart at that point. Zatanni was the last remaining alive member, or anyone who had was still coming into the game. And So the house, she wrote in her journal the house was huge, empty. She felt alone in it.
And he's apparently
Yeah,
cashing
sorry.
out at the register.
No, sorry, that was just had to silence that real fast. And we worked it out in character to sell the house, the clan house, to Namos. It was plenty of space for them. At least I hope it was plenty of space for them. It was way too much space for just Zatanni, and it had a lot of fond memories, but it was not serving her well anymore. And so we worked out kind of to buy the property in exchange for it next door. And so Zatanni became their neighbors in Riften, and Jade effectively kind of moved in after a while, and Zatanni was very ecstatic about that because they were getting to be quite friendly with each other. And, well, the rest I think is pretty much history.
As they say, right? So this brings us to another interesting point in roleplay itself is what people always go on about the difference of the in-character and out-of-character relationship. How did that affect your guys, like your style of roleplay as two Khajiits that were a couple?
That's actually a really good question. I mean, we actually started as out-of-character or in-character friends first. Jade and Zatanni kind of met and were like, these are cool Khajiits. Let's say hi to each other. And so we, stayed in touch as just in-character, transient friends. Jade at the time lived in Morrowind, and Zatanni had very little reason to travel to Morrowind. And so whenever
any Khajiit should stay away, yes.
Right.
Yeah, let's go talk to the slavers,
Yeah. Well, the only reason Zatanni really goes down to Morrowind is to visit Telvanni Contracts. She has friends down there and likes to say hello once in a while. Shout out to Telvanni Contracts, by the way. They're a good group.
I just say you can't really say no to T or Naris. So
No, of course not.
I sent Naris a fake graybeard beard once, and it was great.
And Naris actually wear it at one point and shout at the air.
Probably, I don't know. I'm assuming there was some sort of tomfoolery going on with it, but Iandel played a little prank and said that it was a graybeard's beard, and that if he wore it, he would be able to shout. So maybe, I don't know. I never actually followed through with it.
Walking around with the world's weakest Fusroda.
Can shout over a dandelion or something.
And in roleplay, one of the interesting things that's always happened to me is when you have a character that you basically have no idea what they're going to do, and you throw them in a situation, and you just work with their principles, and something really beautiful comes out of it. And that's kind of what happened with the in-character Jade-Zatanni relationship. Is I had no idea that there would ever be a relationship there when I first met Jade in character, or when Zatanni first met Jade in character. But you play the character, not yourself, and you just go with what the character would do in that situation, and they eventually fell in love. And from that, because we started to spend so much time together, we started to just kind of talk out of character. Like Jade has my Skype contact, and we talk sometimes at work. I believe I call it respites from the drudgery of work when I get a Skype message from Jade and get to respond to it and think about what we can do when we get home tonight. And so the real key is that it's really easy to integrate in character and out of character when you spend so much time communicating with someone. And that's a real discipline to remember to separate those things. Like, I try very hard, if Jade tells me something out of character, to make sure that the character itself does not ever know that knowledge unless it's told to me in character. And that requires a lot of discipline to keep those two separate.
It's actually
go on, sorry.
Yeah, it's actually one of the interesting things about having a in-character relationship, but an out-of-character roleplay partner who's done it to the level that um, you actually you're friends and you're talking to each other, but you don't want to actually give each other any of the in-character knowledge. Like we talk all the time, but we will specifically withhold stuff that we know our characters want to talk about with the other character so that we don't give each other any out of character knowledge that the other shouldn't have.
Right, so it kind of keeps the surprise and the joy of role playing still there. Instead of just like acting out, say, something you had sort of talked about and I guess knew what was going to happen.
Exactly. We do it all the time. The characters recently got married, and um, going into it, they had a general idea of, well, out of character, we had a general idea that, it was going to be pretty loosely done. We didn't send out any like official invitation. We didn't even make a post on the forums about it. It was just um, the the two of them wandering around in character and just sort of telling people who they met, and then they did a announcement together at the uh, Hearts Day festival for that House Namos put on. But other than that, the characters wanted it to be very loose and just sort of in Khajiit fashion, just go with the flow. And out of character, we didn't do we didn't share any knowledge of what the other was going to say or any of the gifts that they had planned for each other or anything like that.
I thoroughly agree with pretty much everything that was just said about that because Jordan plays Aliella, and there's nights where we'll spend hours playing like Civ and stuff, and it's very difficult to not give away things because you're just like you have a character that obviously you enjoy playing as a role player, but you also have to remember that you don't want to spoil things. So even though you're on an out of character friendship with that person, you got to remember that there's certain things that might just spoil fun in game,
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be able to keep things. I mean, it works on multiple aspects. You want to be able to keep things fresh. Um, you don't want things to stagnate because you're sharing everything out of character. And I mean, at this point, Jade and Zatanni can almost, they're to the point where they can finish each other's sentences if they really wanted to. But um, out of character, it's important that you don't disclose everything. And I mean, it goes for outside of relationships as well. You don't want to give everything away so that it becomes trivial. Like, for instance, Jade is in House Namos. Jade is the Grandmaster of the House Knights. They call it the Order of the Ebon Web, and there are often times where people come to Jade or to me and want details about how one becomes a knight. Actually, it happened just before this with a player named Nazim, or he plays Ka, who is another Khajiit who's interested in joining the order, and the questions are hey, what do I have to do? What would my character have to go through in order to become one of these knights? And you don't want to give it all away because the point is that it's supposed to be sort of a surprise. Your character wouldn't know going into it what to really expect. It's something new and it's something outside the norm.
Yeah, I run into this fairly often as a guild leader, where you set up an event and people are like, "Well, what's going to happen at the event? What should I expect?" I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
Just show up, just show up, enjoy it. Like, I don't want to spoil it for you,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm an officer for House Namos, but the training for the knights takes place in character, and it's an event that I have to run for them. And yeah, you just don't want to give it all away. I mean, like, there have been multiple events throughout the community. The Black Paw event to reforge the Nordic axe was one of my favorites recently. It was a little while back, and I'm sure that there were plenty of questions that Lycos had to field about what exactly was going to happen. But same idea. He had half a dozen to a dozen. I don't even know how many red shirts available, and I was even guilty of it myself. Like, what exactly is going to happen? How long is this going to take? So on. But you just kind of have to go with it.
What I usually do is if I have a plan for something to do tonight, I'll usually just say, "Hey, look, can you block out this time? I want to do something," and usually just allude to the really vague, nebulous idea of what it might be. But the devil's always in the details. So you just say, "We're going to do something, and I want to borrow you tonight," or something like that. And then the details are what makes it. So that's usually the balance I try to find with it.
Yeah, it makes sense. So right now we are at this is a new thing. So this is questions from the COS community. Somebody suggested this. I think was it you, Jade?
No, I think it was actually Zatanni who came up with it first.
Yeah, I think
okay. I knew it was one of you two. I couldn't remember which one though.
I mean, yes, it was my brilliant idea.
Yeah.
So thanks to Zatanni here. It's questions from the community. So we opened up the thread on COS to you guys, the listeners, to ask questions. So I'm going to start with a personal one of mine first, even though I've asked like 4 already. It's the benefit of being the host. What is your guys' favorite piece of Khajiit lore?
Oh, that's a good question. You want to go first, Jade, or shall I?
I'll let you go first on the off chance that we actually have the same favorite piece.
Yeah, my absolute favorite is the influence of the moons at birth.
Exactly. Yep, that's my favorite as well. Exactly.
Yes. When a Khajiit is born, whatever the phases of the Joan and Jode are, Mazir is Secunda, defines the physical form of the Khajiit throughout their life. And I kind of, in my own headcanon, play it out a little further, which is that it kind of sets the path ahead for the Khajiit's life. Like if you're born under new moons, I think it is, you become a Suthi. I'd actually have to look it up. I don't have it memorized. And so that means you're kind of a smaller stature. You're a little bit more compact, and you're kind of lanky. You don't have as much muscle mass, but you're more agile. And so that kind of sets you up towards being more like a scout, or maybe being more on the kind of trade or not even being in combat or anything like that. Whereas Jade, for example, was born with waxing moons, if I remember right. So she's a Kathirat, which means that she's rather large, muscular, can punch like a truck. And so she's very good at being kind of like a frontline bruiser, an archer, a sword player, really wants to get in your face and do some real damage. But the drawback to that is that Jade would not be as agile as Zatanni in this case, for example, although she's actually really good about it in combat, but we play it up that little bit. So I kind of take it forward, which is that it makes your physical form at birth, or the Khajiit's physical form at birth, but it also kind of sets not the absolute goal, but the kind of tendencies or the leanings the Khajiit would have throughout the rest of their life. Elfic, for example, tend to have better affinity to magicka than all the other Khajiits. And there's other random stuff in lore. The main comes about because of the moons eclipsing each other, which brings about in lore the so-called third moon, which I forget what the Khajiit's name for it is. Do you remember, Jade?
I'm actually looking at the page right now, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's actually a name for it, which is basically it's the dead corpse of Lockjaw, which is from their creation myth. The Lockjaw basically gave up the body or trick. I don't remember the details. I have to look it up, but it's all documented on UESP if you want to look it up. The neat thing about it is you get so much variation in the Khajiit species, and you can really play it up when you role play a Khajiit because every one of them is so unique. They have their own physical attributes and prowls, and some will be agile and sprint fast, and some will be big and be like an ox and will hit like a truck, and some will be quadrupeds, and some will be small like a house cat, and it really opens up a lot of avenues for role play. And I just wish ZOS would actually put various forms or breeds of Khajiits in the game so we could actually really play a Kathirat or a Sathi or even an Alfiq if we really wanted to.
That was one of the hardest things about trying to figure out exactly what kind of Khajiit you want to play is, there are several different types that the lore doesn't supply any sort of detail about. There are multiple breeds where we literally have no idea what they're about. But the span of breeds that is available is really kind of lends to the whole idea that the overarching theme of the Khajiit people is that they'll adapt. They've been pushed all over Tamriel from the start of its occupancy by the Mer. They've adapted to living with them, they've adapted to being slaves if they have to be, and it's one of the things that can definitely make their lives harder when you have when the Khajiit are born, they're relatively similar. They're the size that makes sense for the mother, and then they quickly grow after that, and this is what the lore kind of backs up. But you can have any mother give birth to any of the other breeds depending on the moons. So you can have the house cat size Alfiq give birth to Sentrot, which are the size of houses, who are stomping around as siege weapons for the Khajiit. There really is no limit to it, but the lore is, I'm sure, supremely difficult to actually have in a game where you're trying to figure out, how do we make this a realistic representation of the Khajiit. And so far, basically, the games have always chosen, well, you get to play this one breed, and that's kind of what we have available. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that someday we'll get to visit elsewhere and be able to delve into the full range of the Khajiit span of breeds.
Yeah, that's a thing with the way like next gen consoles or even just games themselves coming out. I'm sure that that's a huge possibility, and the way that certain modding communities are going these days, there may even be a mod out right now where you can play as a Kathirat.
I know there is for Skyrim.
So I mean, it's bound to happen sooner or later. That and if ESO keeps growing the way that it seems to be growing, and it lasts, I mean, who knows? Who knows what'll happen?
It's been one of those things where, like for Zatanni, her the character is the avatar is represented pretty well in the game. I feel. Can you verify that with me there?
Yeah, she's very much what you see is what you get. The only real difference is that I actually accidentally made her a little too tall, and I
Reroll, come on now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I made her like the first week of the game came out, the little pre-release week, and I had no idea I was a role player back then. So I just, oh, this looks good. Oh, this looks good. Done. Off to Cold Harbor.
Okay.
I've had to make Ayandel 4 times now, and I
Ouch.
think 3 of them I've leveled up to at least 42. So I'm pretty good at knowing where the sliders are.
Yeah, Jade is maximum height on the slider, but she's still not nearly as tall as she should be.
This actually brings us to a question from Cirilla. For Jade, how do you work the out-of-character aspects of being 7 feet tall into your roleplay?
Ultimately, it comes down to sort of tying it into the emotes. It's one of those things where I try to remember, if the people that I'm role playing with, I try to remember, has this person been privy to Jade's height or physical form before? It ends up coming up a lot, specifically at the Wither Tree during the sparring matches, because even though she's a regular there, she doesn't always end up with the same with a familiar face to spar against. But yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things where if someone walks up and initiates contact with my character before I initiate with them, then they might not realize exactly what they should be, what their emote should be, as far as she's taller than almost everyone. So there's been a couple times where I've had Dunmer or some of the medium-sized races come up and try to like stare her in the eye or speak directly into her ear for a whisper or whatever, and I have to quickly do a emote of her stooping down so that they can do so. But it's just sort of one of those things that you fix in roleplay as you can, and use one of those like proactive posts that corrects the previous post sort of idea.
Well, now that you're on the show and everybody that ever plays a game listens to this, you'll never have to say that again because they'll all know.
Right, exactly. I'm super popular now.
What I usually do with Zatanni is I usually have her climb Jade if she wants to whisper in her ear.
Yeah, there's been a couple times that they've done piggybacks or up on shoulder, and like this week at the tree, they were wandering around combining their names and calling themselves one creature.
Oh, I've done that. I think I'll have to try to remember to add it in at the end of this video. But Havard and Ayandel do the same thing, so it's called the Havendel.
Yeah, I remember that video.
So, okay, this question comes from Art, and it is: would you rather fight 1,000 cat-sized werewolves or 1 werewolf-sized cat?
The classic Reddit question. In Zatanni's case, you definitely want to fight 1 werewolf-sized cat because I don't know if you've ever seen a house with 1,000 cats in it. It's literally like 1,000 needles flying at you, and there's no way she could manage that kind of chaos. Whereas if you just have 1 foe, you can focus on it, and she's pretty agile, and so she could probably get away with keeping a good distance from a cat-sized werewolf, or a werewolf-sized cat, I mean, and not get too much risk of being slashed by claws, and yet be able to jump on its back or jump over its head or something like that. So it would be a much easier foe for her to manage.
I'm right there alongside with that answer. 1,000 of anything is going to be horrible to try and deal with.
It's just a quick question. Are both of your characters werewolves?
So the short answer is yes.
Okay. Well, that would shape my answer to that question actually, because if Iandel's not a werewolf currently, so I would rather go against a werewolf-sized cat as well, because I don't want the 1,000 chances of becoming a werewolf.
Right, exactly. There is that too.
So, next one is for Tailger. This is from Tata, good old sweet Tata.
Yeah, she's fun.
Pink lady.
How and when did you decide Zatanni's personality?
So I'm gonna. I have a really long answer to this, but I'm gonna try to cut it down as quickly as I can. The simple answer is that she's actually modeled personality-wise after my Skyrim Khajiit. So I came to ESO kind of off the curtails of Skyrim, which is a game I absolutely adore. According to Steam, I put in like 1,000 hours into it or something crazy like that. I have no idea how I did that, but whatever. It was all good
refuse
fun.
to look at the hours I've put into games, because then I just realized that I've just stared at my computer for too long.
We ended up comparing played stats, Tailger and I, in game, and yeah, there's a lot of hours there.
Zatanni's / played is like over 3 months of accumulated time now. It's actually kind of embarrassing. But anyway.
It's not embarrassing, that's called dedication.
It's called having fun is what it is.
Exactly.
I mean, I've had so much fun with this game. So anyway, her personality came about as kind of modeled after my Skyrim Khajiit, which my Skyrim Khajiit, she was very much the underdog or undercat, and the idea was to play a character that was trying to do right in Skyrim, in spite the world having stacked everything against her. And Zatanni is kind of that same principle, only applied to Elder Scrolls Online. And so I rolled a Khajiit in the Ebenheart Pact thinking, this is kind of like the most unlikely combination I can think of. A Khajiit in a land that is notorious for slavery, and Nords who are kind of xenophobic, and Saxhleel who are untrusting of anyone but themselves. And she's trying to do the best she can in this crazy world. And so her personality is really gravitates around a couple of key principles. The first principle is that she wants to leave Nirni in a better place than when she found it. And she wants everyone who comes in contact with her path to find joy in her. And those two principles, go on, sorry.
Accomplished.
Yeah. Those two principles kind of are what the core personality of the character is, and then I take their back history, which is all the stuff that they've gone through in their lives up to date, and filter those principles through it and see how that kind of uses it as a lens to describe, well, how would that make that character feel today? And so that's kind of how I came about Zatanni's principles or personality. Is I just take a couple of core principles and filter it through their history. A side note that might be interesting is I often play What If. I have a character in Altmeri Dominion called Alzari, who is an answer to the question of what would happen if Zatanni stayed loyal to the Dominion. And that character is the answer to that question. I've kind of played it out in roleplay, although I don't really roleplay in Altmeri Dominion much anymore. Not much going on there as far as I can tell. As far as do I see it changing? Go on, sorry.
It just alienated the entire AD community.
well, they're not listening to this. So
it's
whatever.
a COS update. They don't care.
I don't see it changing anytime soon because she's very rooted in principles, and principles are kind of universal. They will filter through her current. So whatever she goes through in life will shape the outcome of those principles as a lens, but will not actually change too much her core principles. And so her personality probably won't change much unless there's some evil influence on her or some curse or something like that. Like that week she spent chasing yarn balls in the rift. That was a lot of fun.
That was the best.
I actually like running into the players that have like a strict set of guidelines for their character, so that like the characters will actually say no. You don't see that quite as much as you see people who are just kind of like, okay, let's do this. Whenever you run into somebody who has a character who's like, I'm not going to do that, it's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, she will take pretty much every decision that she's given and will filter it through her personality, and which is defined by her principles and history. And she will say, look, I'm not gonna go out and hunt this thing because it has as much right as I do to live. And she will say no to things if she needs to.
Okay, I got 3 more questions. So this one is from Azora Dusk, who, correct me if I'm wrong, plays Delphinia.
Right. Yep. The
Okay.
guild lead for House Namos.
That's what I thought. So Jade, what is the worst thing that Daughter Paws has smelled? And she specifies that she's asking this for a friend.
I have no idea which friend she's asking for. But yeah, so Del and Jade refer to each other as Daughter Paws and Lady Mother. They kind of ended up sort of adopting each other, although it's not really a official thing in any way, because obviously Delphinia is a noble Dunmer, and Jade is a 7-foot tall Khajiit. But so I don't really know what the worst thing she's ever smelled would be, other than just because she takes a very practical approach to her senses. So what one might refer to as a bad smell, she kind of picks it apart and determines what it is rather than, hey, do I like it? But so there was a storyline that involved a couple of warring Daedric factions that I was running for a little while recently, and I think that the disciple of Periite was probably the worst thing she's ever smelled in person.
All right, that's actually an interesting answer to that question.
But
So I'm guessing somebody asked that for a reason.
I'm not entirely certain what she's asking for, but I think it's an interesting question that I should probably figure out the backstory to.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I could just make horrible jokes and say Tors, but that's Tors is her romantic interest. So but he's an orc, so haha, there, take that, Tors.
Yeah, take that, orc. You're smelly. All right, Tailger, this one's for you. This is from Lycos. This is good. You could probably go very in depth with this one. So, Zatani has an interesting relationship with her feral side. What is your take on interacting with that aspect?
So the question was actually worded by Lycos about lycanthropy. God, I can't speak today. She has a werewolf spirit that dwells within. She's had that werewolf spirit. She calls it and is named Kodesh. And she's
Which
lived
is
with it.
Brilliant, by the way.
Yeah, that is a good name, isn't it? She has lived with that werewolf spirit kind of co-inhabiting her mind for almost 21 years now. And at first it was probably pretty crazy because she had no control. It had no idea. I mean, this werewolf spirit was basically born into her and wants something. It probably wants to hunt. It wants to feel power. It wants to feel in control. And it's competing with the Khajiit mind that's inhabiting. And so there's kind of this symbiotic relationship that they develop between the two, which is that the werewolf spirit, Kodesh, needs to work with Zatani in order to get what she wants, and Zatanni needs to respect this werewolf spirit, so that way the two can kind of work together. Because the way Zatanni describes it in character is that she kind of has a chorus on the mind of all the like spirits that want to influence her. There's a voice for her body, there's a voice for her spirit, there's a voice for her mind, and there's a voice for all the outside worlds. And it's really what voice you want to focus on at that particular moment that brings it into focus. And she is always mindful of the voice of Kodesh and wants to respect it. But she understands it's a very dangerous voice, and if she does not respect it, it will lash out at her, and it has in the past. The two have kind of come to a mutual agreement. Now, as far as Zatanni is a Khajiit, and Khajiits tend to have what I like to call an inborn huntress or a hunter's spirit. That hunting does not necessarily mean predator-prey relationship. It means the desire to seek something. And that can be knowledge, such as hunting information in books. That can be even other Khajiits, as in you want to have a really nice relationship. But the desire is to seek something, and that's kind of what they do in all their lives, is they either try to discover what it is they're seeking or seek it out themselves. And so you have these kind of two hunter spirits that are coexisting in the same body, and they both need each other, one more than the other. And it's really fascinating. It comes out in roleplay, kind of, Zatanni has sometimes very savage reactions to things, and will sometimes just kind of lose herself to the moment and will become very predatory and almost want to completely take things apart with her claws if necessary. And she's trained her mind. She's also spent a lot of time at the Temple of the Two Moons Dance in Torval, and she spent a lot of time there training and adapting her mind to kind of through meditation, healing, spiritual healing rituals, and understanding the Khajiit way of life, how they're guided by the Jacques. And so that's given her kind of an ability to kind of temper her mind and work with adverse inputs quite significantly. And she likes to go hunting kind of on her own way, and she likes to let Kodesh kind of drive once in a while. And so they kind of have a symbiotic relationship that way, which is, give Kodesh a few moments to go out and play, and Zatanni then can, let the wolf spirit relax for a bit. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to answer on that question. Khajiits are kind of feline in nature, so they have keen senses and very keen spatial awareness. And I often play that up quite a bit, particularly when dealing with werewolves, because the sense of smell's heightened and the sense of hearing is heightened, and they can see rather well in the dark. And so they naturally just like to be out in the wilds. And that plays into her wolf spirit, who also wants to, be out in the wilds and feel prey and claw slashing and things like that. And so the two kind of just became kindred spirits in that respect.
Because of...
That is a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, Zatanni's approach to it was part of the reason why Jade even became curious. She ended up sort of asking Zatanni to help her experience what Zatanni was doing with Kodesh, and she's nowhere near as stable with it as Zatanni is, but the same idea is kind of taking place in Jade as well, but it was really Zatanni's approach to it that made me as a player want to delve into it, and Jade as a character want to experience the like symbiotic relationship with the wolf spirit.
All right. One final question. You guys are almost done. I know we could probably sit here and talk for about 10 more hours. Any tips for independent role players? You both, meaning Jade and Zatani, are seen making friends all over, like, cross communities. Basically, how do you make that work?
The real simple answer is to give people a reason to want to interact with your characters. A lot of people think that means be a special snowflake, but that is not what I mean. What that means to me is put a lot of effort into giving others that are interacting with you a positive experience. Describe what you're doing eloquently, give a lot of details, and try to leave it open-ended. So when people are reading your post, they say, oh yeah, I can respond to it this way. And oh, that's an interesting concept you're kind of weeding in there. And give them something that they want to respond to you about. Some idea, some concept, some action, some little trinket that makes them want to interact with your character. That's really the basic idea, is just give them a reason to want to spend time with you. And you go to public events and you start just doing your thing, and people just kind of want to hang out with you. That's kind of what happens to me. I would just hang out in front of the withered tree and people would just show up and start interacting with me because they know me. And before you know it, you'd have a whole 7 or 8 people just showing up out of thin air because they just wandered through and saw that roleplay was happening and said, oh, I feel like doing roleplay. And they'd start breaking into the conversation. We'd start talking about everything from cultures of elsewhere to how to make a really good fillet of salmon.
And being that I recently came as a player from Morrowind, where my own experience with it was somewhat closed, and then coming to Skyrim, where my character had the ability to actually interact with others and not be sort of shunned. It's relatively recent that I've become a person who could even really participate openly in some of the community. But for me, the key things that really enabled me to be able to get into the community was I personally monitor the engine forums pretty closely, so I'm aware of a lot of the events that are happening, and for the most part they're available for just about anyone. There's really no. When I came to Skyrim, I was pleasantly surprised by how open all of the events were. Like you could really go to just about anything. You just had to have a decent in-character reason for being present and just make it so that people knew that you wanted to participate. Another big part of that was actually joining the out-of-character Skyrim Children of Skyrim guild that Zatani actually moderates. Being a part of that kind of opened up the community where now I'm able to see the chat of anyone in the community, and the message of the days are all events that just about anyone could go to. So both of those were pretty key, but there are several long-running events, like we've mentioned the Withered Tree on Wednesday nights multiple times. Though, like Kilder puts together a fantastic time every week, and that's open to anybody. When Jade first walked up, she was able to jump right into getting into a match, and I imagine it would be similar for anybody who wanted to join in. But I guess if I really had to narrow it down, I would say you have to really just keep your eye open for stuff that is interesting and fun that you want to do, and then through the roleplay tips that like Zatani just gave, where you give sort of uh, an interesting bit about your character and describe it well enough that people are interested in interacting with you, and you reward them for their continued interaction with more of your story, and you keep the draw there, that eventually you end up with this sort of group of people who want to interact with you no matter where you really go. And I think that really opens up the community a lot, so that you can go just about anywhere and find a friend hanging out someplace.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll actually add a bit of my own take on this as well. The amount of resources available for newcomers to the community to find events going on, like the home page on the site, there's a calendar on the site, and then the in-game guild has the message of the day, which I believe it's updated, I think, every day.
Thank you,
I
Tailger.
try to update it.
Yeah.
I try to update it every day.
Yeah,
I sometimes slack on it.
You have a life to live, right?
I pretend I do.
But yeah, I mean, with those, and then I think almost every night there is a weekly event rolling around. I won't say it's 100% every night, but usually there's something going on almost every night at a tavern or the healing sanctuary or something. My big thing for people, or like new people, is don't just stand against a wall. I see that happen so many times where they'll show up, just stand there and not interact with people. So you just have to take that one extra step of actually moving up to somebody, whether it's you as a new person or as an older member of the community who sees somebody just standing there. You just got to take it upon yourself to go and interact with them.
Like I said, give others a reason to want to interact with your character, and they will do it.
Yeah, you don't even have to like make your character walk up to somebody, but even if you're just like actually emoting while you're standing on the wall.
Yeah. Or just, say, they have some trinket in their hand, or reminisce about the mead they're drinking or something like that. Just something that, gives others interest in wanting to interact with your character.
It doesn't even have to be anything super intense. So, as Atani's saying, you can literally just continue to post about what your character is watching, and make some facial descriptions, and somebody will take notice, and you're almost always going to end up with somebody interested in what your character's doing.
All right. Well, that concludes all of my questions for you guys. Any parting thoughts you'd have before we say goodbye? We'll start with Tailger there.
I did want to answer Thrilla's question about if Zatani would ever want to cure her werewolf side, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
The answer to that is no, because she'd consider that murder. She would basically have to murder her wolf spirit, and she's learned to respect it too much over the last 20 years.
All right. Jade?
I don't have any particular thoughts. I know that there was a question about obviously people know that Jade and Zatani are a thing recently, and or not so recently, actually, it's been months, but that there's a question about Zatani's pregnancy, which she's currently going through.
Oh, yeah.
And there's been multiple different people who have tried to suss out who exactly the father to Zatani's kits or future kits are, and it's I'm pretty sure Zatani is going to leave that question completely hanging.
All I can say is about that is I promised the player behind the character, or the character itself, both in respect, not to say. And all I can really say is that Jade and Zatenni will love them very much when they grow up, or they become part of Nurney.
That's a very sweet note to end it on. I'd like to thank you guys both for being here. It was a very fun interview. Well, definitely, I do want you guys to come back because I think we could do maybe like a Khajiit lore spotlight, and I definitely want to talk to you, Tailger, about the RP PvP stuff that you do. So if that would be good with you guys, I'd like to get you back on at some point.
Oh, I'd loved it. Yeah.
This was tons of fun. Thank you, Nick, for making these happen.
Hey, no problem. I enjoy them myself. So thank you guys, and you have a wonderful night.
Yeah. Good night.
You too, Nick.
Thank you.